In the heart of a remote, mist-shrouded forest, there stood an old mansion that whispered secrets to the wind. The place was notorious among the locals, a dwelling with a shadowy past that made it both intriguing and chilling. It was a house of mysteries, with towering oak trees that seemed to reach out and embrace it, casting long, eerie shadows. The mansion had been vacant for years, haunted by tales of unexplained phenomena, stories of shadows that danced of their own accord, a ghostly presence that seemed to inhabit the very walls. It was a place that dared only the bravest to enter. One crisp autumn day, a family of 4 arrived at the mansion, their faces filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The Smiths had recently moved to the area, and, unknowingly, into the heart of the mansion's dark history. Mr. Smith, a historian, had been drawn to the mansion's enigmatic past, while Mrs. Smith saw it as a chance for her family to start anew. Their 2 children, Sarah and Daniel, were eager for adventure. As they stepped over the threshold, the air grew heavy with a palpable sense of foreboding. The mansion's grandeur was undeniable, but its history was shrouded in whispers of curses and dark rituals. From the moment they crossed the threshold, they could feel the eyes of countless shadows upon them, shadows that seemed to move on their own, darting and dancing in corners and along the walls. That evening, as the family gathered in the dimly lit dining room for their first meal in the mansion, they couldn't help but exchange uneasy glances. Plates clinked softly, and the flickering candlelight cast. The following morning, the Smiths gathered around the breakfast table, their expressions marked by a restless night's sleep. The eerie occurrences of the previous night had left them with a lingering sense of unease. Sarah's eyes darted nervously around the room, while Daniel fidgeted in his chair, his curiosity warring with his fear. "Mom, Dad, did you hear those whispers last night?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Smith exchanged a knowing look with his wife, both acknowledging the unsettling presence that had invaded their sleep. "Yes, Sarah, we heard them," he replied cautiously, not wanting to escalate their fears. As they shared their experiences, it became clear that each family member had witnessed strange phenomena. Mrs. Smith described how the shadows had seemingly danced in the hallway, creating bizarre, elongated shapes. Mr. Smith recounted a peculiar incident in the library, where the books seemed to rearrange themselves when he wasn't looking. Even Daniel, the youngest, admitted to seeing toys move on their own in his room. Their breakfast conversation was interrupted by a loud, ominous creaking sound, as if the walls themselves were groaning in protest. The family fell into a heavy silence, the tension in the room palpable. They had barely scratched the surface of the mansion's mysteries. Later that day, Mrs. Smith decided to investigate further. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, she ventured into the mansion's dimly lit corridors, her footsteps echoing eerily in the empty space. It was as if the mansion itself was watching, waiting. In one of the hallways, the Smiths had reached a breaking point. The eerie phenomena in the mansion had escalated to a degree that could no longer be ignored. It was clear that they needed answers, and the only way to find them was to delve into the mansion's sinister past. Driven by a sense of urgency, Mr. Smith decided to conduct research on the mansion's history. He scoured old archives, visited local libraries, and interviewed elderly townsfolk who remembered tales of the mansion's dark past. What he discovered sent shivers down his spine. The mansion had once been the home of a notorious occultist named Malachi Blackwood, who had lived there in the late 19th century. Blackwood was rumored to have delved into forbidden practices, including shadow magic, a form of dark sorcery that allowed him to manipulate and control shadows. As Mr. Smith dug deeper, he unearthed an account of a ritual that Blackwood had performed within the mansion's walls. A ritual meant to unlock the secrets of the shadows themselves. The ritual involved incantations, strange symbols, and the use of a mysterious, ancient artifact known as the Amulet of Umbra. The more Mr. Smith learned, the more convinced he became that the shadows haunting the mansion were a result of Blackwood's malevolent experiments with shadow magic. It was as though the very essence of the occultist's dark practices had seeped into the mansion's foundations, leaving an indelible mark. Armed with this newfound knowledge, the family faced a difficult decision. They could either flee the mansion in terror or confront the supernatural forces that held them captive. The shadows had become increasingly aggressive, and the family's safety was at stake. The night was moonless and draped in a thick, suffocating darkness as the Smiths gathered in the heart of the mansion, the very place where the malevolent shadows seemed to be most concentrated. Mr. Smith held the handwritten notes from his research, the key to the counter ritual that they hoped would quell the living shadows. The atmosphere in the room was tense, a mixture of fear and determination. They had rearranged the furniture to match the occultist's descriptions in his ancient journals, forming a circle with the Amulet of Umbra placed at its center. The amulet was a dark, foreboding artifact, a smooth obsidian stone with intricate, otherworldly etchings that seemed to pulse with an unholy energy. As they began the ritual, their voices trembled with trepidation. Incantations in a language they could barely comprehend filled the air, the words resonating with a spectral, ethereal quality. The shadows that had previously been elusive seemed to gather and coalesce around them, forming a swirling vortex of darkness. The family members held hands, their grip tightening as they chanted the incantations. Suddenly, the room was plunged into an abyssal blackness, and the shadows lunged at them with an otherworldly ferocity. Panic surged through their veins as the shadows took on grotesque, nightmarish forms. The room became a battleground between light and darkness as the family fought to regain control. The Amulet of Umbra, glowing ominously, became their beacon of hope. With each verse of the incantation, the amulet's radiance grew brighter, forcing the shadows to retreat. Time seemed to stretch into eternity as they continued the ritual. Exhaustion threatened to overcome them, but they couldn't afford to falter. The shadows, once menacing, now appeared to wail and writhe in agony. In the aftermath of their intense confrontation with the living shadows, the Smiths found themselves facing a new reality. While they had managed to banish the malevolent entities temporarily, the shadows still lingered on the fringes of their lives, an ever-present threat. The family's resolve to uncover the truth about the mansion and its connection to the occultist, Malachi Blackwood, remained unwavering. However, they knew they needed expertise beyond their own to fully understand and combat the supernatural forces at play. Mrs. Smith, determined to protect her family, embarked on a quest to seek help from a seasoned paranormal investigator. She reached out to the renowned Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne, an expert in the occult and the arcane, whose reputation for dealing with the inexplicable was well known. Dr. Hawthorne arrived at the mansion with an air of authority and a wealth of knowledge. She was a striking woman with silver hair that framed her face and eyes that held a depth of understanding. Her presence alone seemed to command respect, instilling a sense of hope in the Smiths. They gathered in the dimly lit dining room, where the family had first encountered the eerie whispers of the mansion. Dr. Hawthorne listened intently to their accounts of the living shadows, nodding knowingly as they described their experiences. "I've encountered similar phenomena before," she said with a calm certainty. "But to truly unravel the mysteries of this place, we must delve deeper into Malachi Blackwood's dark past and the secrets he buried within these walls." With the family's assistance, Dr. Hawthorne began her investigation. She meticulously examined the journals and artifacts that Mr. Smith had unearthed during his research. The occultist's writings contained cryptic instructions, ancient symbols, and references to shadow magic that were both fascinating and chilling. It became evident that the mansion itself, with the guidance of Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne, the Smiths had uncovered the secrets of the mansion's shadow magic and devised a plan to confront the living shadows that had plagued them. Armed with ancient knowledge and their newfound ally, they gathered in the very room where they had first performed the counter-ritual. The atmosphere was charged with tension as the family and Dr. Hawthorne stood within the circle of protection they had painstakingly prepared. The amulet of Umbra rested at the center, its dark surface gleaming with a malevolent energy that seemed to mirror the shadows themselves. As the incantations began, the room transformed. The shadows, once lurking in the corners, grew restless and agitated. They swirled and coalesced, forming menacing shapes that encroached upon the protective circle. The battle between light and darkness was about to reach its climax. Dr. Hawthorne's voice resonated with authority as she chanted the ancient verses, her eyes fixed on the amulet of Umbra. The shadows reacted violently, lashing out in a desperate attempt to break the circle. It was a battle not only of magic, but of willpower and determination. The Smith family members, though filled with fear, clung to their resolve. They could feel the shadows' malevolence, their whispers of dread and despair. But they also felt the power of their unity, their unwavering determination to protect each other and their newfound home. As the incantation reached its crescendo, the amulet of Umbra pulsed with a blinding light, causing the shadows to recoil in agony. The room seemed to tremble, and a deafening cacophony filled the air. The very walls of the mansion appeared to quiver, as if they too were trying to escape the darkness that had consumed them. Then, with the malevolent shadows banished, the Smith family and Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne found themselves standing in a room bathed in an eerie, otherworldly light. The oppressive darkness that had plagued the mansion for generations had finally been dispelled. Exhausted but triumphant, they exchanged relieved smiles and congratulatory words. Their ordeal had tested their courage, resilience, and unity. The family had confronted the supernatural and emerged victorious, with Dr. Hawthorne's guidance proving instrumental in their success. As they began to regroup and prepare to leave the room, a curious sight caught their attention. In the center of the room, where the amulet of Umbra had once rested, now lay a centuries-old tome, an ancient, leather-bound book that emitted a faint, pulsating glow. Dr. Hawthorne, her eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and trepidation, approached the mysterious book and carefully opened it. Its pages, covered in cryptic symbols and arcane diagrams, revealed itself as the Shadow Codex, a repository of knowledge about shadow magic that had been lost to time. The family gathered around, their curiosity piqued. The Codex contained not only detailed accounts of the rituals performed by Malachi Blackwood, but also instructions for controlling and harnessing shadow magic, a power that had both fascinated and terrified them. Their journey into the heart of darkness had uncovered not just the mansion's secrets, but the potential for wielding the very magic that had once tormented them. Dr. Hawthorne, an expert in the occult, recognized the significance of this discovery and the responsibility that came with it. She advised caution, stressing the risks and consequences of delving into the realm of shadow magic. While the Codex offered knowledge and power, it also harbored untold dangers that could easily consume those who dared to wield it. The Smiths, now bonded by their shared